Hello, welcome back. My name is Ari, and today we are talking Goodreads Choice Awards, specifically the fantasy category. Before the Goodreads Choice was even announced, I had read like 8 to 10 of the books. So I had a fairly good head start. Normally I read all 20. I didn't really have time to read all 20 this year, but I've definitely read the top 10 plus like 6. I've read all of them before. So we're going to talk about how I feel about the winners and what I think. Let's do like honorable mentions first, I guess, and talk about the ones that didn't make the top 10. The Book Eaters and Ordinary Monsters, I DNF'd both of these. After I realized I wasn't going to make it through all 20, I was like, you know what, I'm not interested in either one of these stories, so instead of like suffering through reading them, let's just go ahead and DNF them. And then the 4 books that I read that didn't make the top 10. Now, all 4 of these are 4 stars and would have made it into my top 10 even though they didn't make it into Goodreads top 10. So I actually like all of these significantly more than I like most of the ones in the top 10. Alright, and let's go through my top 10 and I will give you the plot of each of these stories and then my thoughts on it. At number 10, I put The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This is like a cozy fantasy where witches can't be near each other because their powers get out of control, and the main character goes and kind of like nannies for 3 young witches who shouldn't be in close capacity to each other but are. There's also like a little bit of a romance in here, grumpy sunshine characters type thing. This wasn't bad as far as the romance goes. It was one of the better romances because they were very strong at communication, which I like, but I'm not a big fan of witch stories, and I don't like kids. So this didn't really do it for me, but I think a lot of people will very, very much like it. I didn't hate this. I didn't hate anything at all in the top 10. The lowest I rated it was 3 stars. So like 10 to 5 are all 3-star ratings. So absolutely none of these books are bad. It's just, this is my least favorite. At number 9, I put Daughter of the Moon Goddess. Now, this one is ranked so low because mostly it's forgettable. Like, I honestly forgot what this book was about and had to go look it up. So this is about the moon goddess gets banished from Earth. She has a secret daughter, and then her daughter grows up on the moon and then kind of leaves to try to save her mother and get her mother unbanished, I guess. And then she is an archer and goes to like this royal court, and I don't remember, there's a love triangle. This one, the only thing I really remember about it for me is I felt that the lovey thing going on felt very immature. It read like a traditional YA, even though all the characters are definitely adults. It just had the YA tropes that I'm not in. Like, I don't hate the lovey trope, I just kind of roll my eyes at it because it's overdone. But it felt like aged up characters. It felt like an adult characters who were very immature, basically. So it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. Alright, next up at number 8 is the Atlas 6, and this might be controversial because this was like hugely blown up on TikTok. Now, I read the traditionally published version. I did not read the original, like, self-published version. Apparently the stories are like wildly different between the 2 of them. This follows 6 young adults who were initiated into a secret society by a guy named Atlas, so the Atlas 6. Basically they live on this campus and study magic for a year, and then 5 get into the secret society and then 1 doesn't. And it just kind of follows all of them. The characters are kinda pretentious assholes. Like, I didn't really like any of the characters. I thought the story was fine. The plot was reasonably interesting. Like, I wasn't bored reading it or anything like that. It's a very character-driven story, and I didn't like any of the characters, if that makes sense. I don't know that you're supposed to like any of the characters. I don't think you're supposed to like any of the characters because they're all kind of awful, but I wasn't emotionally invested in any of the characters. So it was fine. Like I said, it's not bad, but it wasn't great either. All right, now we're getting into books that I actually own, and we've got Fairy Tale by Stephen King. This is the novel that Stephen King wrote during the pandemic. It's basically like an amalgamation of a bunch of different like Grimm's fairy tales. And it follows a young boy named Charlie who finds an old recluse man who has injured himself. He's like fallen off a ladder or something and like broke his hip. And Charlie kind of like cares for this man and his dog, and then finds out there's like a portal to another world. There's a couple things that I want to say about this one. First, there is a plot line in here about a dying dog. Like, the thing that moves the plot forward is he's trying to save this dog that's dying of old age, right? The dog's not sick, it's just old. And there's magic that will make the dog young again. So you've got like the dog dying plot line. The dog does not die. Because I know people will like come into this and be like, I'm not reading this, I can't deal with a dead dog. The dog does not die. The dog is fine. So just throwing that out there. It is a spoiler, but it is not the main purpose of this book. It is just like a plot device. The other thing is, this book is like 200, 300 pages in before any magic even happens. So Stephen King is very wordy, and this is very overwritten, and I think that this book could easily be half its size and tell the same story, but that's not Stephen King's style. So if you've read Stephen King before and you can deal with how like wordy and how overwritten his books are, you'll be fine with this. But if you know you don't like that, then I definitely would avoid this. Overall, this is cool. It's all of the traditional points of a fairy tale told in like a completely unique way. Next up, I'm going with The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. This is the most recent one I read. I read it a couple days ago in a vlog that you would have seen up yesterday. But this is the final book in the Wax and Wayne trilogy. Now, it's hard for me to talk about this because this is the 4th book in the 2nd era of this universe. So this is like the 7th book. So there's a lot to spoil. Basically, I didn't like this as much as the rest of the book. It's one of my least favorite Sandersons, but I still really like Brandon Sanderson, so it ended up being higher on the list. Most of the story is fine. There's a like plot, like a side plot, I guess is what I want to say. It's like a world building for the future of the series that doesn't really have much to do with this book, but has to do with the rest of the Cosmere. That I hate that trope. And I'm going to tell you the trope. I don't really think, like, it can spoil it, but the way I'm going to tell you is not really spoiling it. But if you really can't handle spoilers, then skip over the rest of this. But basically a character, a dead character is not dead. And I don't like that. Like, be brave and kill off your characters. You can write a great book by just killing off your characters. You don't have to bring them back to life. So I don't like that. I'm not gonna tell you which character, because telling you the character would spoil it, but just saying that a character is alive and it's not part of the main plot, that's not gonna spoil anything. You're never gonna guess which character it is because it's so stupid. Anyway, a lot of Cosmere world building in here, a lot of Cosmere Easter eggs in here, so that's all good. The ending of this was great. The 5 or 6 epilogues after this were so incredibly unnecessary. It was a 3-star the whole way through it, went up to a 4-star at the ending, and then dropped right back down to a 3-star after that. Those like unnecessary epilogues, like I don't care. Make them into a short story elsewhere, but not a single one of them was necessary. Not a single one of them. All right, at number 5, and the last of my 3 stars, I'm gonna put Babel by R.F. Kuang. This one, very controversial opinion on it. Like, obviously I liked it well enough because it is 5 out of 10. It's like right there in the middle. But I don't like R.F. Kuang's writing. I think it's boring. And the story I don't care about. The message is amazing. Like, I love the messages and the purpose behind her writing. I think it is amazing. I don't like the actual storytelling of her writing. I don't know if that even makes sense anymore. This is like historical dark academia in an alternate universe. It's like the early 19th century, and Oxford has a school of languages where there's a magic in this universe and you can use languages on metal, I want to say silver, and it creates like magic basically. And you have to have a very true, very like heightened understanding of languages to do this. And it's discovered that like typical European languages, or even the classics like Greek and Latin, are not as effective as languages outside of that realm. So although the school is very white and very male and very elitist, they invite women and men of color in like treat them badly, but being like, oh, well, you're not as good as a white person, but you're better than other people of your race or sex. So the message is really like, are you thankful for having this opportunity, or do you kind of overthrow the establishment, and can you overthrow the establishment without violence? That's the question that this book attempts to answer, and that question and that discussion is very important and still relevant, even though this is a fantasy. I just didn't like the story. At number 4, I put The Winner, which is House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second book in the Crescent City duology. Both of them are super thick like this. This, I don't remember what happened, but this follows Bryce and Hunter, and they're trying to get their lives back to normal, but of course, like, other shit goes down and happens. This one isn't as good as the first Crescent City book, which was House of Earth and Blood, but it's still good. I like the story, I like the characters. This is a very character-driven love. Like, I don't even remember the story that well, but I know I love the characters. And I am just trash for anything that Sarah J. Maas writes because her characterizations are so good. And, like, I just love all of the characters. I love their personalities. I want to be with them or be them. So, bottom of my 4 stars, but still a 4-star. Is it worth the win? Maybe. It's very popular. A lot of people like Sarah J. Maas and her writing, so sure, it definitely wins the popularity contest. Next up is the other popularity contest, which is War of Two Queens by Jennifer Armentrout. This, again, is fantasy romance. This is the 4th book in this series. It doesn't even make sense. Like, I can tell you the plot of the first book. It doesn't really make sense with what's going on here, but basically There is a young girl who is the maiden, and she is kind of like a virgin sacrifice. She grew up knowing that she was going to be a virgin sacrifice in a world of like vampire creatures, and she's supposed to have like her face covered, she's supposed to be innocent and perfect and everything like that. And she's actually a really interesting person. And you know, shit goes down. and shit has gone down, and she is no longer that character anymore, but I can't really tell you where it goes from there without spoiling the previous books. So this is just like my pure enjoyment of these ridiculous characters. It's like vampires and werewolves. It's super trashy, super pornographic, but it's fun. Like, even the plots of these are awful. There's so many holes, but I don't care. I just really, really enjoy it. Now we're down to the last two, and this is very interesting because number 2, which is Lesbians and Lattes by Travis Baldree, is the one that I voted for and the one that I think should have won. It was not my favorite, but I think it's the better of these two books, if that at all makes sense. Now this is another cozy fantasy. I think this cozy fantasy was done better than Secret Society of Irregular Witches, or it may just be better to me because there's no kids in it. But basically, an orc warrior retires. She doesn't want to adventure anymore, and she decides to open a coffee shop. And that's it. That's the whole plot of the story. It's super cozy. It's super adorable. All the characters are wonderful. This is like a book of warm fuzzies. So if you like D&D, like just adventure fantasy, but you want something warm and fuzzy, read this. It's wonderful. It's pretty short too, but it's wonderful. All right, and my number 1 is The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. This is the 3rd book in her Scholomance series. I gave every single book in her Scholomance 5 stars. The main character is a raging bitch, and I love her with every ounce of my being. Like, this is my ideal bitchy female main character type of story. So yeah, that's all this is. This book is definitely not for everyone, and the series definitely isn't for everyone. There's a lot of people who don't like it, and I totally understand why they don't like it. But she is my ideal main character, so I loved all of the books that she's in. Well, that is my stack of books that I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards. Let me know down in the comments below which one of these books you read and which one would be your number 1 if you got to decide Goodreads Choice all on your own. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.